Welcome to Season 3, Episode 1 of Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, a Dark Sun podcast.
I'm your co-host Jesse.
And I'm your co-host, Robert.
You said season 3. What happened to seasons 1 and 2?
So I'm counting the first season as the episodes with Wayne, and the second season, the ones with that you and I have done. I just kind of wanted to mark points so it doesn't seem like we're just like endlessly making podcasts. I feel like so far we've been kind of primarily talking about the products and doing interviews, and we'll still do that. But I also want to talk about like actually playing and running Dark Sun. Like, what does it look like at the table? How do you prep? Stuff like that. We're also recording video tonight. So assuming everything works out, I'll upload that to YouTube after this. And next time we might even have a live show recording with an audience.
Wow.
And then you guys can ask questions and whatnot.
Today we're talking about the Crimson Sphere. But first, the news.
All right, Dark Sun news. So I revamped the Dark Sun Discord. It's been pretty active, even though about 240 out of 770 are participating. So that was the original number, 770. About 240 have jumped in since then. So if you want to check out some Dark Sun stuff, go there. I added a bunch of channels. I mostly did it because initially, like when we were alerting people that like there is some Dark Sun news, people were coming in saying like, "Why did you tag me?" It's like, well, you're part of the Dark Sun Discord. I think you want to be tagged with Dark Sun news. So I made it this way. Now people can opt into what they want to be tagged for. So there you go.
Very nice. The Dark Sun Discord's been pretty active lately. It's a nice change of pace. There's a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Over on athos.org, tons of news. Obviously, we got the Bone, Stone, and Obsidian podcast now on YouTube.
Yeah, I started, I figured out how to do some video and got the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 up. I'll try to get the other ones up as well. And then, of course, this will be a video and it will actually be an actual video of our face the whole time instead of just a loop video.
Wow. Technology.
Exact-
What can't it do?
yeah,
Uh,
right.
we've got another Athasian Survey Project post, number 24, Star Rock by Jack Meyer. As always, Athasian Survey Projects are sort of quick dives into specific interesting locations around the world, and these are wonderful ways to get some GM inspiration about, oh, yeah, that's a neat location. What if I wrote an adventure about that?
Yeah, and then we have the Journal of Zong Tosu, entry 7, the Predator Sea. They are all the way on Guthay, so they are way out of Athos and in onto Guthay. So that's been an interesting read.
Saying they're using chitines, which is pretty cool because I actually just used those in a game recently. Of course, the chitine first appears in Forgotten Realms. They're mutant offshoots of drow experimentation. But in Dark Sun, that's obviously not the case. For my game, they were part of the Pristine Towers mutations. Or the
Mm.
Journal of Zong Tatsu. Well, you'll have to read it and find out for yourself.
There's also 10 key facts about Dark Sun that every player should know. So I put this up because I just feel like there's not a lot of sort of introductory stuff on the website. So I wanted to start writing more content like that. And so that's the first of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of times people come in and go, "Hey, I've got someone who's new to Dark Sun and I want to introduce them to the setting. What's a good short introduction?" So these are always handy to have. Um,
All right.
then we've got another Lawful Stupid blog, repost number 6, Fighting Styles, which looks more into fighting styles for warriors, thematic groups, arena combat, how certain non-weapon proficiencies interact with them. Uh, a pretty short and sweet introduction into fighting styles. And what I like about fighting styles for Dark Sun is that it's a good way for you to sort of personalize a character. You can be like, I really want to be into two-handed weapon fighting, and I'm just going to mash people with big weapons. Or, I'm going to play a two-weapon fighter, or I'm going to rely on a specific trick, disarming or dirty tricks or something like that.
And there's another Athasian survey project, number 23, this one on Dragon's Crown by Jack Meyer, of course. So check that one out. Dragon's Crown is a cool location, and it's a cool
Yeah,
little
yeah,
write-up.
yeah. Yeah, and you've been busy. There's the fruitful narratives using in-game lore versus real-world analogs. There was a conversation in the Facebook group about using an orange as a fruit versus using a pharaoh fruit. And in world building, there should be a balance between utilizing unique in-game lore like the pharaoh fruit and integrating real-world analogs such as an orange. This is a nice way to think about how this setting is similar to things that are familiar to us and how it is alien to us. So, great little compilation of a lot of those thoughts.
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of, even though it wasn't specifically what that conversation was about, it just made me start thinking about like when do you want to use, something that's in the world, or when do you want to use something that is from our world? And I think there's time for both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for Dark Sun, where there are clearly things that are wildly outside of our experience, like metamorphosed dragons and telepathic powers. And then there are other things that are familiar to us, vast deserts and sweeping mountain ranges and tyrannical overlords in brutal cities.
Yeah, and we got Return of a Sorcerer King reposted. That is an adventure by Daniel Bandera, where it's a second edition module that attempts to bring back Cielba.
This is particularly poignant to me because I did that in my fifth edition game several years back, where I rewrote Black Flames, and the PCs wound up going back in time and saving Cielba from Hamanu, and then returning to their present, and she's alive and came with them. But Daniel takes a different tack with his particular group that winds up with the PCs winding up in the middle of a fight between Cielba and Hamanu, not in the past, but in the present has survived, and Hamanu decides to come back and finish what he started oh so long ago when he ruined the city of Yarmouk. So very interesting. Look, totally worth a read.
Nice. And moving to the Facebook group, Bob Drew has been busy. He's looking for fungus among us. He's looking for mushrooms of Athos.
Yeah, I'm a player in Bob's game, so I'm not allowed to look at these posts. Um, he also asked about the most off the wall Dark Sun sessions you've ever seen, which
Hmm.
isn't filling me with fear for the game that I'm in.
He's like, what
On
can I steal from other people?
Right. Oh my gosh, I can't even read this thread, but I'm already terrified. Um, Frederick Leclerc, meanwhile, has been asking about merchant campaigns. I love me a good merchant campaign. Traders are adventure generators, and the merchant campaigns give you strong reasons to go all over the map. So I think that's very cool too.
I've been asking kind of a weekly question: what Dark Sun questions do people have? And there's been a ton of great answers, or great questions and great answers. So if you've got a question and you're in one of those groups, please ask it.
Yeah, anyone who's new, like jump in, and if there was ever things you wondered about Dark Sun or thought wasn't clear, or you just read about something and don't know where it came from, this is where to go. Meanwhile, we've got some more actual plays. Blue Book's RPG's Sea of Dark Sun is still streaming on Twitch, though they haven't played in a couple of months, probably because it's the holiday season, and who can play Dark Sun when it's
Yeah.
snowing?
Hmm.
But hopefully we will see more of them in the future.
And of course, Mysteries of Athos, they are still playing. They just posted a new one. They're on Balic, looks like 14, Fight or Flight.
Mm.
The depleted heroes consider their options to destroy the Antloid Queen or retreat and lick their wounds.
I would retreat and lick my wounds, but we'll see what they decide. There's also a game going on that is a Rime of the Frostmaiden port for Dark Sun. You just take all of the cold and you turn it into hot, and Bob's your uncle, right? It's that easy.
Sure.
And I believe they're on episode 7, The Lurkers in the Pit. And of course, we'll have links for all of this in our show notes.
All right. Well, let's get to the main topic, the Crimson Sphere. So
Ba-ba-ba.
this was originally concepted and written by Adam Night Druid Miller, and I know Jack somehow got in touch with him, and when Spelljammer was coming out, they decided to sort of update it, including the stuff that was in Spelljammer. Um, Reason being that uh, there were some details in Spelljammer that made a lot of people think that, and what I'm referencing when I say Spelljammer is Spelljammer, the 5th edition adventure. There were some details in that that made people think that a place called Doom Space was actually Athos Space before. And there's going to be a little article and another little reading, actually, that will probably have already come out by the time you get this, but where I talk about that specifically.
Yeah, as
And
I
we'll talk about it
recall,
later too.
there was like a pre-release teaser where they talked about Doom Space and said that
Right.
it was like a system of all dead worlds, and one of them was like a desert planet full of pyramids and ziggurats and monuments to lost civilizations that had all died out. And it was like, what could you possibly be talking about? And then they went in a slightly different direction with the final release of the Spelljammer 5e book. But
Well, and
meanwhile,
even more than just being a desert planet, there was a release on D&D Beyond of a map, and it literally said Athos space, and then they quickly took that down and put up
yeah,
the same map again, and then it said Doom space.
yeah,
So,
oops, uh,
yep,
mistakes they were made. Um,
they were.
so our heroic designers for Crimson Sphere have delivered a book that is remarkably not super long, but it is content rich. They have a lot of material in this book. Now, I want to get one thing out of the way at the start, of course, which is all the people going, how can you possibly have a crossover of Spelljammer with Dark Sun? Isn't Dark Sun supposed to be deliberately isolated? It's in a closed crystal sphere. You can't get to other places from there. You can't enter with a Spelljammer. You can't leave. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. So what gives? And to their credit, this is one of the central elements of the design that permeates this book is the designers said, okay, the not only does all the fiction tell us that you can't get there from here, but they even said in Spelljammers or in Sage Advice in Dragon Magazine that the official position of TSR canonically is that Athos is a closed system and you can't enter or leave the crystal sphere. And what the designers did is said, why is it a closed system? What makes this happen? How come Athos is different from other places? Obviously, we've got out of game considerations like theme issues and bringing characters
Right.
from other planes, or worse still, Athasians getting out, and suddenly you're fighting renegade halflings in a wizard's magic plane traveling sphere. But the credit goes to these folks for turning this into in-world explorations of why does this happen and what are the consequences of this being the case? And all of this motivates this design. So bravo, really good thought process here, guys. This is how you do really good design work. Let's get into it.
Yeah, yeah. All of those sorts of things, those limitations, I feel like they always uh, just encourage creativity, and I think that's really where they went here. So while Adam Miller kind of started it, Adam Cieslak, Jack Meyer, Dave Millman kind of picked it up. Scott Harshbarger made an amazing cover. The cover is
Yeah,
fantastic. There's a lot of great interior art, of course, by Izar Ben Yosef, Jane Bradley, Jack Meyer, Red Spider Lily, and Yannick Moreau. There's new ship designs, or not? Yeah, there are new ship designs. Plus, there's just some others that are sort of remade,
right.
kind
I
of
think the
classic ones that you'll
Scorpion ship
recognize.
is an update.
hmm and those were by Neil Cherryman, and then Jack Meyer did the graphics and layout, and Zach McKean did the star map concept and review.
Our map for Athos. So if you ever wondered what the constellations like are in Athos, now you know.
Yeah,
So the book opens with an introduction to the Crimson Sphere. There's 11 planetary bodies plus the sun. It is huge. The amount of space out there is enormous. And they decided, okay, your Spelljammer adventures in the Athos sphere are going to mirror the adventures that you have on Athos on the ground. You have these vast tracts of barren, lifeless territory that you have to travel that are filled with terrible dangers, whether environmental or monstrous. And getting from one place to another can take a long time. You have to think about it, you have to do a lot of prep work, and it is not an easy journey, even with a spell jamming ship. So they keep that vibe of this is a place of desolation, it's a place that is a monster haunted wilderness. And if we want to make the long journey from one inhabited area to another inhabited area, then this is something that we need to plan for. We need to have contingencies and preparations. We got to bring lots of supplies. We got to bring our best magic and psychic abilities because it's going to be a challenge. Every journey in Athos space is an adventure.
And I can't remember if they specifically talked about, like, why you couldn't get through the sphere, but the way they sort of limited that was by just saying that there's this giant black gulf that is sort of between Athos space and the edge of the sphere. And so, it takes 2 months just to cross that. So, there's some sort of horrors in there that nobody really knows about, and so anything that would go in there, usually is lost. So, anything that would come through the sphere wall would not only have to come through it, but then come through that black gulf.
And in addition, if that wasn't enough, the space Athos, in Athos space, the sphere itself is protected by effectively a coalition of really, really powerful renegade wizards, much like the sorcerer monarchs who are down on Athos itself, who have a deal basically saying we keep other people out, and in exchange, we don't mess with your stuff on the ground and you don't mess with our stuff on the other planets. And so you get this great explanation for how come nobody else ever visits from some other sphere. Because they show up and then this giant flying death pyramid helmed by a 25th level wizard blows them up.
Right. Yeah, I thought
Um,
that was a really cool way to sort of mirror what happens on Dark Sun by having these void wardens, and they really get into kind of the details of what that means and who are some of the people that sort of have gotten around that, the invaders, who are they?
right. And so, like, the hints are that the invaders are the Illithids, and of course in Spelljammer, the Illithids, the Mind Flayers, are one of your major antagonists. They're always trying to get into everyone's sphere and get all up on their business and turn it into another node in the massive Illithid mind empire. And Athos, being a place that's full of psychic power, is very attractive to them, but that also means it's full of people who will resist them. And the Void Wardens, the folks who are protecting Athos space from outsiders, are pretty diligent about hunting them down and scrubbing them. So the invaders are trying to get a foothold in Athos space, and if you're just a group of like 6th to 10th level characters who are tooling around in a stolen Scorpion ship and discovering what Athos space is all about, running into Mind Flayers is going to be a pretty bad experience for you. Um,
For sure.
but yeah, but it'll be interesting adventures. Although I would expect it for the typical Athasian. You're just like, oh, good, another psychic horror with tentacles. Look, I'm busy fighting Sirlons, so take a number. Um,
Right.
but yeah, you're absolutely right that the Void Wardens they slipped very neatly into the world history. The idea being that if you're using the whole Rajat storyline, when Rajat starts engaging in the cleansing wars, he's like, okay, we're engaging in a planet-wide war that's going to have massive repercussions for our entire civilization and all the people of Athos. And the last thing that I need is some schlub showing up on a spaceship and getting all up in my grill. So he cuts a deal with the Void Wardens and says, you need to keep everyone out until I get everything settled. And in exchange, you can keep that planet over there. That one, that's all yours. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm busy here with the Dark Lens. So, um, and this is chef's kiss because the design neatly informs like here are challenges and problems for players to deal with. There's like space police that are trying to keep Athos protected from outsiders, but they're much like the sorcerer monarchs on the ground. The Void Wardens are not your friends, and they're not here to help you. And if you are tooling around as an independent and spell jamming ship, it's much like the aforementioned merchant campaigns where you're traveling from place to place, and you got to deal with the problems of running into corrupt officials and monsters and everything everywhere you go. And they this also neatly explains like how come nobody on Athos knows about these guys because Rajat cut this deal that it was like you can't deal with anything on Athos, and they're like that's cool. I got an entire planet, got my hands full, bro. So nobody knows anything about the Void Wardens, and as far as you know, if you live on Athos, this is it. There's no other planets out there. And when you get out into the stars, you discover, oh, there's all these other planets, and each of them also has its own tyrannical dictator who needs to have his anthill kicked over. Um, and so it's like none of it disturbs the existing lore. If you're just focused on what's going on Athos, all of this stuff can exist, and it does a great job of explaining why no one comes from other spheres without disturbing or upending any of the existing history of the setting. But if you decide to dive into it, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like how at first I was like, "How are there sorcerer kings, essentially, these void wardens? How are they, like" there are not that many of them, I can't remember, less than a dozen, and so, like, if they have their own city states, because that was still a thing, city states, but they're spread over these worlds, but a lot of the worlds are uninhabitable for the most part, except for the parts where the city states are,
Cats.
cattail.
Cat tax.
And so I thought that was cool, like, they just did a really good job of sort of limiting where people could live, like, because all the other planets are not great to live on either.
Right, right. And so you've got this non-aggression pact. It's enforced by the dragon. Cattail again. Oh no, he wants to be part of the show too. Um,
Yes.
so the dragon is enforcing this non-aggression pact, and just like the dragon can outclass any one of the sorcerer kings individually, the void wardens probably don't want to get into a tussle with Boris. But Boris is mostly busy keeping Rajat imprisoned. So the last thing he wants is to be like, "Oh, I have to go fly to another freaking planet and kick this guy in the teeth." Um, so but, like, depending on how your campaign runs, that could be a perfect excuse for where is the dragon when he's gone for a year? Where did he go? How come nobody's seen
Mhm.
him? Oh, the dragon was off on Janavar getting in the fights with the people up there. And then because the accords are so secretive, all of the wild space accords that are designed to structure the interactions of all the different power groups in Athos space, um, it means that when players get into Athos space, you're tripping over all of these things that you don't know anything about, which means it's perfect. You're accidentally falling face first into plots because you have screwed up something that's got this delicate balance of power that's been going on for thousands of years. Just like when you start messing with the sorcerer monarchs and the status quo down on the ground, you start doing things that are attracting the attention of those in high places up in space, and now you have to deal with that. The difference being that you're getting a space revolution. You've got your Battlestar Galactica or your Buck Rogers sort of theme, but much more John Carter of Mars and Dune style stuff going on. Um,
Right.
and it can really tie into high level play too. Like, does the Order know about this? Almost certainly. The clairsentient master of the Order
Yeah.
probably knows this stuff. Are they going to tell anyone? No. Why would they do that? So you have opportunities to feed this information to players, but you can do as much or as little as you want, depending on how you want to take your campaign. And it's a perfect hook to dangle in front of mid or high level players. Hey, you could hop on a Scorpion ship and leave Athos behind. And they're like, whoa, we made it. We're off of Hell World. Everything's great. Oh man, we're in Hell Space. Everything's terrible.
Yeah, in one of my games, my players are or the characters are 14th level, and they actually just met a Cyrlon who was on a ship that was crashed, and they convinced him to leave, and so they kind of saw I had to be a little bit more spaceship than the normal Spelljammers, but, it was funny that it just kind of happened. It was just sort of random, really, that it happened, and then we're talking about this now, so that was cool.
Yeah, good coincidence there. Um, So as you dive into the book, they go through the Crimson Sun and then each of the different planets in a typical sort of Spelljammer fashion. You get a few paragraphs about each of these worlds. There's a nice little illustration showing the planetary plane with Cinder and Erim and Slag and Athos and whatnot, and all the planets going out from there. So you get a nice scale image of here's how big each of the planets is compared to the others, and then descriptions of what's going on. And every one of these is nice in having not just like, oh, it's this size and it's this kind of planet and it takes this long to orbit and it's this far from the sun, but there's a little description about physically what's going on with this planet. This one, is a once verdant world that got burned up when the sun turned red and expanded, or this world is a cracked airless world that has iron mines deep, deep, deep underground or whatnot. But like those iron mines, there's always a little hook. There's like a little inspiration for adventure and information about the people that might be living there. like the aforementioned planet of Cinder that used to be a verdant planet and is now totally scorched because of the expansion of the sun when it turned red. There is a city state there called Mada, and it's on the far side of the planet so that it's protected by the planet itself, the planetary body, but it's still super hot, so it's surrounded by hot jungle. Um, it's got a void warden, and then fitting the theme of like this planet was scorched, the void warden is also horribly burned in battle. Um, and so his Templars are out there looking for things to heal him. He's still able to act, but he's constantly like lashing out at people because he's just pissed off all of the time. And everybody that survives here does so as hunter gatherers. So you've got a taste of Gulg, like we've got a hot jungle with hunter gatherers that are surviving among it, but instead of the sorcerer monarch being, isolated or sort of a remote leader figure, this one is a tyrant who's lashing out at people and sending his minions out looking for mysterious things. And it's like, oh, this is full of adventure hooks. The players, run into a group of Templars who think they found something they want to bring back to his king, except the Templars all got killed by invaders. And then the players fight off the invaders and they get the thing. And now everybody wants it because they think it might heal the king or help someone else or sell it on the black market. Same sort of deal. All of the planets have this
Yeah.
description of the setting and then a hook, thing to do there.
I really like, stepping back to the sun, that they
Yeah.
put something on the sun. The Palace of the Dawn is a kind of crystalline structure that bends light around it, and, um, it's invisible until you get near it. It's also inhabited by fire elementals and sun para-elementals, uh, under the control of this powerful sun cleric and his sun drake companion, and that just sounds awesome.
Yeah, it strikes me as being one of those like video game levels where you've got the invisible walls, and then when you get close, you can see the crystal reflections in them, and even navigating that could be a challenge. Plus, of course, it's super hot; it's on the surface of the sun, but that again makes it an amazing high level adventure. And okay,
Mhm.
so you've got like a sun cleric who's super powerful, and he's got a sun drake pet, and you've got a castle of invisible walls, and there's got to be some sort of amazing treasure in there. What would the heist look like to get that? That would be a
Right.
lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, so they go on to describe beyond Cinder, you get to Irim, which is a cracked and desolate planet that is a rocky body that is full of tunnels and passages. So if you really, really wanted to get your underground adventures on in Dark Sun, a world that famously doesn't have a lot of dungeons and Underdark, this is where you do it. And supposedly there's lost iron mines there. Um, and lost artifacts and whatnot. So this is the place to do all of your space spelunking.
Yeah, I really like that the whole planet is, like, almost broken up, like, there's a massive, massive chasm,
Hmm.
and just the idea of, like, you know, climbing down that chasm or whatever, we think the Grand Canyon is big, and this is, like, hundreds of miles across.
Hmm. Hmm. You think you land your ship and you get out and you've got your little necklaces of adaptation so that you don't have to worry about breathing and you're looking around going, it's strangely humid in this cave. Oh, it's a stink worm. Ah. Yes, Empire Strikes Back. Um, they've got an asteroid field, the Embers of Slag, which is a planet that apparently exploded, like Krypton, and it is uh, inhabited by a bunch of short dwarf-like critters that can mess around with gravity. Um, so that's pretty cool because you can drop in and have a quick trade with the Gravs and resupply. They have their own local problems. And how cool is it that like you've got the chunks of a planet that cracked apart, but the core is still liquid because it hasn't cooled
Yeah.
because it's so huge. So
Mhm.
magma clerics, take note.
Right. And then it talks about Athos, and it mentions House Hakeem, and this is a merchant house. That I don't know if they really specifically kind of call that a merchant house, but that's
They
what they
do. They
are,
do.
and they come down to the planet. Um, Also, I didn't notice if it said, like, that was part of the Accords or not.
Oh, there's a sidebar about this. Salt Citadel and House Hakian. So House Hakeem is allowed safe passage to and from Athos. They have reached a side deal with the dragon, and so they are allowed to broker trade between the sorcerer monarchs and the void wardens. They serve as your intermediaries. So just like the various merchant houses are the untrusted but necessary groups who connect the city states, Hakian is the group that connects Sorcerer Monarchs of Athos with the Void Wardens up in space. And they got a special exemption to do so, and their leader is an arcane or mercane, the only one in Athos space who got stranded here a long time ago and then realized, hey, I have an opportunity here since the arcane are skilled traders and travelers. I can sort of bridge this literal space gulf and turn this merchant house into an opportunity. And this is also just fantastic with adventure ideas because if you've already set up your PCs for you're doing adventures for merchant houses regarding a caravan or whatever, now you can work for a merchant house that winds up going into space. Or even just like have them show up as a side thing and hint at there's bigger things going on that you don't know about. You can really add to that conspiracy vibe of Athos. Super cool. The other thing is that um, the guy who runs this house is the only one who knows how to make helms. Of course, without a
Mhm.
helm, you can't make a spell jamming ship go. So, as much as nobody likes House Hakeem having a monopoly on intersystem trade, nobody can do anything about it because if you kick over House Hakeem, you get no more spell jammers. So it's state of the guild in Dune.
So talking about more stuff that's happening on Athos, there's a whole there's a whole chapter called "The Last Flights Out of Athos," the Lost Archipelago, which is an archipelago on the other side of the world, and it's a place where House Hawking comes down to, and that's where they get their ships. So the ships that we have here in Dark Sun are, of course, going to be different than the ships, the regular kind of spell jamming ships, because Dark Sun, and so they are made out of gigantic insects, of course.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I love the idea of giant dragonflies that you ride on,
Yeah,
and kind of like Lex. Um, Amusingly, Last Flights Out of Athos reminded me of the old Disney flick, The Last Flight of Noah's Ark, where they had a plane carrying a bunch of animals and it winds up crashing and they convert it into a boat so they can get off the island they crashed on. But yeah, so they've got these gargantuan flying insects that they can use that are psychic and solar powered. And the people here have uh, Skyborn society, um, which is riding these colossal insects everywhere. And then when the insects die, they hollow it out and then they convert them into sky ships so that they can uh, trade with the spell jamming houses with them.
and
They
they
can
they
even
just
be,
live on. They're always flying. They just
yep,
always live on those ships, which I thought was cool.
yeah, yeah, very nice.
Definitely different.
Um, Yeah, and like the last flights out of Athos is only a couple of pages, but there's a ton of stuff because it's like, oh, you've got two of these other subcontinents and a whole archipelago and the Silt Ocean and what's going on over there, and you could easily run entire campaigns out of here multiple times.
For
Um,
sure.
Sandwiched in between, there's also a tiny chapter that talks about the NPCs of the Crimson Sphere, and this is basically talking about most of the Void Wardens. So just like we know a little bit about the Sorcerer Monarchs, we can understand their motivations. This lets you know what are the Void Wardens up to, what are they trying to do, um, and uh, so, for instance, the Void Warden of Sentinel, the city-state that is on one of the moons and serves as sort of the direct line of defense over Athos, tried to do the same sort of thing as Kalak and skip part of the Dragon Metamorphosis, and it went wrong, and he got horribly messed up as a result of it. Um, so that's pretty cool. You've got basically a sorcerer monarch who actually finished the spell that Kalak was trying to do, but did it wrong. Um, then there's uh, one Void Warden who is trying to get um, a bunch of pieces from this artifact, the Zodiac. They're trying to get shards of the Zodiac, and other pieces of the book talk about, oh, one of the shards of the Zodiac is hidden here. So if you want to do your Athos equivalent of the Rod of Seven Parts, where you're sending the
Yep.
players here and there and everywhere to do get all of these pieces, great race sort of stuff, get there before the Templars do, uh,
Hmm.
follow up on rumors and stuff, all perfectly seated right in there.
It also talks about how, like, if the Void Wardens found out about the Dark Lens, then they might be real interested in getting it. So
Yeah.
that could be a reason why they come down. That could be cool, like a whole invasion from space of the
Yeah,
Void Wardens.
so cool. You can like go totally off the rails where the normal high level Dark Sun campaign is okay, we're gonna go kick over some sorcerer monarchs, but now you get these sorcerer monarchs from space, and where are the battle lines drawn and who's gonna ally with who? Can you maybe make a deal with Nibene post um not Merchant House of Amket, Marauders of Nibene, post Marauders of Nibene, and you
Mm,
like go back to Nibene and say, "Hey, these invaders from space, we need to do something about it." And he goes, "Maybe you did do me that one favor back in the day. All right, we'll talk about it."
right.
And uh, create a much more divergent dynamic than what you would see in a lot of Dark Sun games. So it's a nice way to freshen up your campaigns if you run a lot of Dark Sun like we do. Um,
Yeah.
After that, there's a
So out
chapter. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna kinda go back to the cities, the planets as we were kind of moving
Oh,
through
yes.
them. Um, in talking about Athos, of course, we're gonna talk about the moons, and so there is a section on Ral and Guthay. Uh, on Ral, I thought it was cool. There is rumored to be a host of ooze-like, uh, plasmoids there. So,
Mhm.
plasmoids are, these this race of ooze people, and they were in second edition, I think, right? And then they were brought to fifth edition as well.
Yeah, and the plasmoids get hunted by moon beasts. And moon beasts, if you read up in the monstrous manuals, they supposedly they live on the moons of Athos and they get summoned to Athos by having certain cursed items, if I'm recalling correctly. And so, because moon beasts live on Ral, it's hard for anyone to get down there and actually verify that these plasmoids exist. Um, but every once in a while, they mention also the invaders try to make a landing on Ral, and that gets met with resistance by the Void Masters. So it's one of those sorts of things where it's like, okay, what do you build out of this? Well, you've got these reclusive hidden communities of plasmoids, maybe, and you've got illithids invading, and you've got moon beasts all over the place. The obvious adventure that comes out of this is that somebody finds out there's a thing the plasmoids have that we need. We have to talk to them. How do we find them? We got to run the blockade of the void wardens, keeping out the illithids without getting smote by either side, make it down to Ral, get past all the moon beasts, and find these mythical plasmoids, and then establish communication with them. Cool stuff. Guthay, conversely, has the city state of Sentinel that I mentioned earlier, which
Mhm.
is a Void Warden outpost that's sort of last line of defense, the close orbital guardian of Athos, hence the name Sentinel. Um, but it's on the dark side of the moon, so that you can't see the city from Athos. Um, and Say has a kind of an obscured surface because of its atmosphere. Got extensive cave systems that host some water and life, and a few slave villages. And the Void Wardens of Sentinel, of course, are constantly repelling illithids here as well. Um, Sentinel's an enormous ziggurat city. So, like, if you like ziggurat, okay, how about one that's 10 miles on a side and 3 miles tall? This ziggurat is
Yeah.
so high that if you go to the top, you are going to start having like atmosphere problems, atmospheric pressure changes. Um,
Yeah, I thought that was
so
cool, and the idea that
yeah,
Rajat kind of built that there, uh, kind of shows the level of involvement that he had in the whole sphere.
right. And the Void Warden that's supposed to be there hasn't been seen in a century.
Mm.
So what's going on? And that like raises the question: if the Illithids get wind that the Void Warden is actually missing, and they launch a massive attack, who's going to stop them?
Mhm. Moving on, there's the Sextant, which is an asteroid belt, and it is uh, used to be a planet, at least according to some Blue Age texts that were found.
Mhm.
But it's broken up, and so as a result, there are large and small asteroids all over the place, and there is a city state on one of them, and they give you actually on a couple of them, and they give you just different locations that you can find in this asteroid belt. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, which is great.
I love the structure and the format for this because they said, okay, it's an asteroid belt. There's millions of rocks out there of various sizes, and most of them are not very habitable. But they do sort of like the Expanse does and say, okay, there are a few places in the asteroid belt that are worth inhabiting, and we're going to break it up into basically 6 regions where there's enough resources that make it worthwhile for people to live there. And here's what these regions are. So you got the Shard Islands, you got the Verdant Stones, you got the Cursed Cluster, and
Mhm.
all of these different locations each has their own tenor to them. And if your characters are sort of puttering around in spell jamming ships, you could spend several games just going around between different asteroid clusters and visiting each of their different ports of call and seeing the different flavor of the gameplay there and meeting the NPCs who live there. One little thing that I thought was a happy coincidence, or is it, is that there's an old dwarven citadel in the cursed cluster called Banshee Rock. And of course,
Mhm.
this is named for the fact that since it's a dwarf citadel, when the dwarves got killed by the illithids, they all turned into banshees because they were unable to fulfill their focus. And the illithids got destroyed because most of their mind powers don't work on undead. Um, but one of the main writers for Dark Sun stuff was Shane Lacey Hensley. And Shane Lacey Hensley is a designer more famous for being the founder of Pinnacle. And Pinnacle wrote Deadlands. And in Deadlands' space adventure spinoff, Lost Colony, the alien planet you're on is called Banshee.
Nice.
That goes up on my conspiracy postboard.
Yeah, yeah, right. Awesome. Uh, and then there's a place called the Doom Dock, which I think is cool. It's an old naval yard, and so there are just ships still around, although it's abandoned. It's kind of haunted by construction golems and spirits and just interesting stuff. Actually, that is not what I was thinking about. Wasn't Isn't there a place that is a bunch of ships strapped together?
Oh, I think you're right. But
Mhm.
the Doom Doc is interesting
Mhm.
because I think every science fiction series has had the episode of we have come to the abandoned ship repair facility and what's wrong. In
Right.
Enterprise, it was actually a creature that made you think that it was repairing your ship, but it was actually devouring your ship. I think Lex had one where it's like, come to our starport and we'll freshen up your ship and entertain you. And there was something awful going on there. I'm pretty sure they did it in Farscape. So, like, if your players are into that sort of thing, you roll into Doomdock and you just start getting them like biting their nails about, oh gosh, which version of this is it going to be? We know it's going to be bad, but what kind of bad?
Moving on, there are more planets that have city states on them. We're not going to go through all of them because we'd be here
Right.
forever. But there's just a lot of cool
Forever.
stuff all over the place. But let's talk about let's talk about the planet called Rajat.
Yeah, the eighth planet, largest planet in the Crystal Sphere, named by the
Hmm.
Wardens after Rajat, known as Endlia, dark, cold, ash-choked, nine-mooned. Um, yeah, and
And
several of
so
the moons
most of
have been conquered by
the
invaders.
planet is uninhabitable, but the moons all around it are inhabitable, and so you get the details of all those moons, which is cool.
Yeah, so it's basically like, okay, we're going to go out to planet X, and the planet itself is just a navigational point because it's surrounded by nine different moons. Some of them have illithids, some of them have monsters, um, some of them have clouds and plant life and whatnot. And there's like a gas moon that supposedly the illithids have a base hidden there. Um, there's another moon that's just a poisonous gas body. This is kind of cute because, like, in a typical solar system, as far as we know, you'll have like a bunch of solid planets, and then you got your gas giants further out where they didn't coalesce right because of the density. And then this is like a little subset of that, where instead of everything orbiting a sun, it's orbiting this dead, ashen, lifeless orb, and you've got nine different orbital bodies, and some of them are solid and some of them are gas. Cute mirroring of the model.
Yeah, and they have some cool creatures shown. This sort of I can't remember what they were, but these kind of worm-like creatures. These sort of wyvern creatures. A lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of really neat inspirational art, and they mentioned that one of the moons, At Ur, has a hive of grell on it, and this combined with the art reminds me that um, for Dark Sun players who are really familiar with the setting, this is a great chance for the GM to introduce all kinds of monsters that you've never used, whether stuff that you're making up on your own or other things that you're just pulling from the Monstrous Manual that normally don't exist on Athos, but maybe they do exist on these other worlds. And so you can have your players running into things like Grell or things like giant worms with big stabby arms that the players are going, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah. Then we move on to Janivar, and there's a bit about it, although it's not too much. Just cool place. We go to Izithar, again, a kind of just a mention. What I like about Izithar, there's a moon there. The moon is called Zinchil, and it's home to various monstrous insects and small tribes of feral thrycreen.
Right.
They're not actually thrycreen from Athos, which is cool. They are sort of devolved Zikchil who came from outside the crystal sphere.
Yeah, so it's a neat little a nod to how the Zixchil and the Thrycreen might have some sort of shared biology, but these are the ones from Spelljammer. Um,
Mhm.
the yeah, there's four moons around that planet, and each of them again has its own sort of thing going on. And to me, this is like leaning into how everybody knows that Dark Sun drew some inspiration from John Carter of Mars and the Barsoom sagas, but ERB also wrote a whole Venus saga, and there's a entire subgenre of Sword and Planet, and that's really what this
Mhm.
book is. This is Sword and Planet. Um,
Right.
Very cool. And finally, we get out to Lirua, the furthest out spherical body. Um, and this is an icy world because it's so far away. Um, and it's mostly inhabited by frozen and crystalline creatures. Um, but the ice itself is super dangerous because it's not just frozen water. It includes various frozen gases and ammonia and stuff like that in it. Obviously, player characters aren't going to understand the chemistry of it. All you need to know is that if your PCs are like, there's an ice planet, let's go harvest ice. We can be ice pirates. Get the space herpes. And then realize, oh, the ice is bad. We can't
Yes.
actually sell this
You
to people.
cannot drink the ice.
Yeah. Don't drink
There's
the ice.
also, like, a bunch of remorhas and crystal spiders on there. Crystal
Right.
spiders made of ice, which sounds cool as well.
Yeah, I like that. I love frozen spiders. And then out beyond all the planets, we have other stellar bodies that are way, way out there, like the Messenger. Now, interestingly, they leave the Messenger to just being like
Yeah.
one paragraph. Um,
Mhm.
Talks a little bit about its legendary comet and then how it uh, disappeared uh, in Free Year 7 and was never seen again. And of course, anyone who's a Dark Sun superfan has heard us talk about the stuff that appeared on the internet way back in the day where they were talking about the possibility of the Messenger being a life-shaped halfling generation starship that had gone out to explore and was coming back to Athos. And there was talk of doing an adventure where it crashes or the PCs get onto it or whatever. But I think that's like pretty well known by the community. So no need
Mhm.
to get into it. If you want to do it, great. If you don't, you've got a gazillion new planets to explore here.
And then the Fallen Forge, which I think is fantastic. So it's an old forge that is 1,000 feet in diameter, and it's got a great dwarven face carved into it. There's tunnels and chambers that run through it, and it looks like it was built by dwarves with very, very fine precision. And despite many centuries of looting, it kind of still yields treasure. And this just kind of screams to me, Space Hulk. Like, what
Oh
is
yeah.
on there?
Yeah, yeah. This is a perfect like opportunity to have essentially a Dark Sun mega dungeon. You got a
Mhm.
giant floating dwarf-headed vault in space filled with tunnels and chasms and rooms and the dwarf head tells you, okay, at some point this was excavated by people who either were dwarves or really liked dwarves, um, constructed with much artistry and precision, it says. So there's going to be, presumably, like, what does this mean in terms of how it was constructed? There's going to be living spaces. There's going to be quarters for crafting stuff because it's a forge. There's going to be rooms full of resources. There's going to be smelters. There's going to be atmosphere controllers and all sorts of stuff. And then you get down into the depths inside of the asteroid where they dug too deeply and too greedily. What happened to the dwarves? Why are they gone? How come the forge is no longer in operation? What if the PCs decide to take control of it and turn it into a base of operations? What are you going to haul out of there? What lurks below? And it is your perfect opportunity to generate a mega dungeon for your Athasian PCs that can carry them through many levels of delving and just like go onto YouTube and look up Dwarf Fortress and find someone's massive dungeon, jot it down, good to go.
For sure. So after the Fallen Forge, we hit the Black Gulf, and once again, that's this massive area around essentially Athos space that takes months to get across.
Mhm. Yeah, this
And
is
as I was mentioning previously, this is where the collection of ancient ships that is kind of bound together is, which I think just kind of sounds cool. There was a big battle, a lot of defiling happened, and so there's just a ton of ships that are ruined out there
yeah, the
in the Black
forlorn
Gulf or near the Black Gulf.
Sargasso. Um, and of course, Sargassos are nothing uncommon for D&D players. There's one in Ravenloft. There's a whole domain that's a Sargasso Sea. Um, but this is a space Sargasso. A similar sort of thing popped up in one of the old Interplay Star Trek 25th anniversary adventures, where there's an extra dimensional Sargasso where a bunch of ships from various alien species have gotten jammed together so that they can try to survive by sharing power resources because there's nothing in the void that they're in. And this has got the same sort of feeling. You have this massive void, and they say anyone who's been out here for more than 5 days starts getting attacked by terrible things, and the attacks just continue to increase in frequency until you get out to one side or the other. And so the Sargasso is just this huge landmark of all of these ships that have been smashed together by gravitational forces and unleashed defiling magic, and no one survived, or did they? And if you're trying to go out there and loot them, great, go grab as much as you can get, but you're in the Sargasso, and things are going to come out of the dark and try to eat your ship. Finally, at the edge of Athos space, you get to the sphere wall, which gives the Crimson Sphere its name. Um, and this is interesting because you can, um, it's textured like sandstone. You can portal through it using pass wall and stuff like that. But metal that passes through it usually turns to stone. So,
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
you can't just import metal from other settings, even if you've like got your 15th level characters and you're spell jamming over to the Forgotten Realms. Oh, we'll buy a bunch of swords for cheap and then import them back to Athos. Turned into stone. And you don't even want to make the trip because as soon as you leave, your stuff might turn into stone. It goes both ways.
Hmm. They kind of describe why you can also kind of see through the black gulf, because if there's this black gulf that you can't see, when you're in it, you can't see through it, but when you're outside of it, you light shines through it, so you still see stars from everywhere else.
Right. So some property of the black gulf is absorbing light while you are within it, and then it's almost like a
Hmm.
massive darkness spell. And then once you get out, it's
Right.
like boom, oh, I can see the stars again. And then, of course, they have their little legend, Paradise Forlorn, of a lost paradise realm that's a verdant little asteroid covered in trees and things like that. And it's real, it exists, and it's trying to eat you.
And then we get into the NPCs, which we kind of talked about before. However,
Right.
there's one more that we missed, Zol, which is interesting.
Oh,
It is of course, uh, what's his name? The Evangian
mm.
of Spelljammer, of the Crimson Sphere. So, they have to give some hope here, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and he's obviously like a 21st level Evangian. They said he's only in the earliest stages, and he has returned to the sphere after going out exploring. He went out and then he came back. And as an Evangian, a being of immense power, obviously he can survive doing this. Um, and it's another great hook. Like, okay, once your PCs get into spelljamming space and they need a patron, this is a character that you can use because he's going to send them on mysterious errands and maybe give them information about the Void Wardens and how to avoid drawing their attention. But he's only a like baby Evangian, 21st level, and entirely possible that the PCs will wind up surpassing him as they go, or maybe something terrible happens to him and you have to step up into the role.
All right, and then we move to the last chapter, far in the future, Doom Space,
Right.
and they did a fantastic job here of kind of going through what they put in the Spelljammer book, and then modifying it to Athos space, kind of using as much as they could from that, which was great. They also kind of talked about the end times and like, what does that look like for Athos, to have this gigantic, um, black hole, essentially the Eye of Doom, um, instead of the sun. The sun implodes and becomes the Eye of Doom. Why? Nobody knows. At the same time, the whole planet Rajat just disappeared, and so there are just strange things happening. They give several examples of like, well, these are rumors of why, why all of this happened. In addition to the Eye of Doom and Rajat disappearing, the Crimson Sphere is shattered and just sort of floats, and so now it's open for uh, other spelljammers to come in, and that's part of the Spelljammer adventure.
Right, and it's very cool because they don't necessarily say, "Oh, this is what Athos is in 5e," but rather it's sort of like, "This is a possible future for Athos. You could do it in
Right.
your second edition game, or you could do it in fifth edition, whatever." And there's
Hmm.
a whole bullet list of like, what are some of the disasters that could happen? Rajat gets out of the hollow and collapses the sun, or the sun hatches like an egg, and a primordial void dragon comes out, and the Eye of Doom is the mouth of the dragon, or the gods have finally broken through the sphere wall and gotten in to Athos, and they are mad as hell, and they curse the whole system and turn the sun into the Eye of Doom. Whatever you want, and so it's just lots of inspiration. And then they talk about, okay, all these worlds get swallowed by the Eye of Doom, and then they go down the list of everything that appears in the Spelljammer book about how this gets modified. And Athos itself survives, although it only has one moon, the other moon having been ripped away. It gets called Firene. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that the planet starts cooling dramatically because the sun is gone. But intense volcanic activity on Athos from its connection to magma and from the gravitational shearing of the forces of being orbiting the Eye of Doom, mean that it gets these big volcanoes that are creating areas that are heated and not frozen, and then there are other locations that are permanently locked over in winter. And it's literally just like Fire and Ice, the Ralph Bakshi movie, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Um, and they talk a little bit. There are 5 or 6 paragraphs about kind of what happens on Athos, what happens to your favorite sorcerer kings, and how the people are surviving. Um, and then it continues on with more of the moons, and again, what happens to them. It talks about the Void Wardens, what they do when all of this happens, and so it's just a really good job of merging the
Yeah,
two.
it's super
Um,
complete.
yeah,
I loved the paragraph about Ulrich. I feel like that was like I sensed the
yeah.
hand of June Solar there, or someone who was like put that in there for him. Templars believe they're irrigating Uruk with lava flows from the Smoking Crown Mountains, and
Mhm.
the vast majority of the world's survivors congregate around the light and heat that these flows provide. Can you imagine that? All the city streets of Uruk like get paved over and then filled with lava so that the city has enough heat and light to survive in a lightless void of a world with no sun, or the dark sun of the Eye of Doom, if you will. And then living huddled in these squalid stone buildings that are built above these channels of magma. Man, what an image. And
Yeah.
Hamanu becomes the Lion of Light. He becomes a full dragon. He completes his transformation, and he is the whimsical despot of Uruk, the last surviving outpost of light and survival. Oof, Hamanu like.
It talks about how all of the sorcerer kings turn into full-fledged dragons, which is interesting and a cool idea. They call it the Black Age, and they say it really belongs to Drigoth, the Lord of the Dead.
Right. And it makes sense that the Sorcerer Kings would finish their transformation because I think we've
Yeah.
discussed before that many of the Sorcerer Kings stop around level 23 or 24, and then they start doing the Kallax shuffle. They're looking for how can I skip the atavism phase? Because you turn into a 25th level dragon and you're atavistic for several levels, and you destroy everything around you, and you blow up your own city state when you're in that sort of a condition,
Mhm.
and probably kill a bunch of your own Templars, and you've ruined your power base. And you come out of it a 30th level dragon, but you have nothing left. And how are you going to fight off the other Sorcerer Kings if they gang up against you? So nobody wants to do that nuclear option. But in this scenario, the world's already been wrecked. Your city states have been destroyed. There is no reason for you not to just pull the plug on it and go for it.
Yeah, so
Things are
super
terrible. Why not
interesting.
make it worse?
I so we were supposed to record this a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh, I still want to record something." So I took this chapter and I basically wrote it as a narration, and I narrated it. It's about a half an hour. So if you haven't
Nice.
listened to that, it should be probably on, or maybe I'll just save it till after this, and you guys can let me know how you like it after this. Um, but I thought it was really cool. I really tried to sort of channel my inner Dan Carlin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's
Yeah,
a
history
he's
podcaster.
a podcaster that does history podcasts, and so I tried to kind of do it in the style of one of his. So it's a little bit over the top, and I think it's cool. You have to let me know.
Yeah. Um,
All right,
so
moving on. We
finally,
get into
first
we get into
appendix
the ships.
ships. Yeah, and this
There
is cool.
are
There's an acknowledgement that because of the shortages of wood and stone and whatnot, that they make ships out of the husks of dead giant creatures, whether they're insects or whatnot. There's an eel ship. Um, there's a lamprey ship that's used by the Illithids. And then, of course, we have the ziggurat, as seen on the cover or in Stargate.
yeah, there's a map of the ziggurat, which is cool. And then you've
Yeah.
got some scarab ships, crimson scarab ships, and scorpion ships all
Each
cool.
of these includes those maps. It's got a layout of each of the decks of the ship, and this is important because, of course, you're going to be boarding ships and having all of these to ship combats and boarding actions. And so you could see, oh, I've got a battle map. Print this out, put it on the table or on Roll20 or whatever source you're using, and boom,
Hmm.
you've got the various levels where your action is happening. Totally complete. Feed tells you like here's where the helm is, here's where the captain's quarters is, here's where the armory is. So if you give the players a goal like we need to get onto that Scorpion ship and we need to steal this cache of weapons that are being delivered. Perfect. You've got all the layout for your adventure right there.
Right. And then moving on, we get into new items. There's just 3 of them. One, of course, is the side jammer, and then we have the life jammer. And so those are going to be, uh, stuff that is um, just goes with Dark Sun. The life
Yep.
jammers kind of used to, used by illithids and Templars and you know as you can imagine what it does, it drains the life out of creatures. So it is the what's the puppet movie with where they drain the life out of people? The Dark Crystal.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Dark
Yeah.
Crystal. Um,
The Skeksis
and then they talk
stealing the
about the
life.
shards of the Zodiac, which we sort of glossed over. But the shards of the Zodiac were sort of what let all of the Void Wardens ziggurat ships fly. And so this talks about the shards of the Zodiac and how they can be, like we mentioned previously, they can be kind of put together to your Rod of Seven Parts adventure.
Yeah. So the shard of the zodiac. Okay. I'll back up and say the side jammers and the life jammers. Obviously, like life jammers are already mentioned in the Spelljammer box set, but they take a moment to say these are the only 2 types of helms that you find in Athos space typically. Like, is it possible someone could show up with a different kind of helm? Yeah, sure. But for your typical adventuring, this is what you see: side jammers, life jammers. And life jammers, you're burning people as fuel. Cards of the Zodiac, they mentioned, okay, Rajat made this at the same time that he made the Dark Lens. And so it's faceted midnight black obsidian crystal shards. And they even have a nice picture where all the shards are like put together into a star-like pendant, and then one of the pieces has been removed. Um, and there's a total of 12 of them, and they form a large obsidian and silver star. Um, and they let you just one lets you use it to function like a side jammer helm as a compact wearable item. So your psionicist wears one of these shards, and now you can jam a ship without needing to go and get a separate helm. That's kind of a big deal. But
Hmm.
the there's a comment as well that if you know how, there's a special ritual you can do. They leave it up to you to decide how that works. Um, that lets you attach to a living vortex and grant spells to Templars.
I thought all the vortexes died though.
Maybe on Athos, but we're in space, Robert. We're in space.
Yeah.
The but this is fantastic. This is an amazing player goal. We got to get one of these
Hmm.
shards. We got to use it as a jammer so that we can find the pieces for the ritual. Meanwhile, everyone else wants to get the shard from us. We find the pieces of the
Of course.
ritual. Our Evangion guy here can get a living vortex and become a sorcerer king of good, like Aronis, complete with his own Templars. And of course, every jerk out there who's trying to become a dragon, like Great or Farcloon, is going to want to get it
Hmm.
so that they can become a sorcerer monarch too. Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, great hooks. And finally, we come to the constellations of the Crimson Sphere, and
Mhm.
this is work by Zach McKeon. He's working on putting out a big book about Athos's stars and things like that. So that'll be super cool when that comes out. And this is amazing. If you've seen
Yeah,
any of his stuff, you
yeah.
know
The
uh, just how good they are.
the one for this book is a one page. Think of it like a sneak preview for McKean's stuff. It shows the typical nights. Here's where the stars are. Here's the constellations that they form, what they're called, what house they are in, and what that is called. So if you have any characters in your game who are at all interested in astrology, this is for them.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, that was a great talk going through
Yeah.
the Crimson Sphere.
It's a great book. I really enjoyed it, and I think they did a marvelous job of addressing the initial complaint that a lot of Dark Sun aficionados might have of how can you cross Spelljammer with Dark Sun? And they're like, "Let me show you, son."
Yeah. Yeah, they did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
So,
kudos.
thanks, Jesse. We will see what we're doing next time. I don't know, we haven't really discussed that yet. But where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm available on Blue Sky as Jesse Heinig. I'm over on Facebook. I occasionally pop into the Dark Sun group. Sometimes I have been cited on athos.org over on the Arena forums. And of course, you'll see me frequently on the Dark Sun Discord running Sand Marches expeditions. How about you, Robert?
Yeah, you can find me at Radu at tabletop.social on Mastodon. I am on Blue Sky, but I totally forgot about it until you just mentioned it. I'm on I'm on the Facebook group, of course. The Discord, there's tons of activity going on there, so I've been there. And I just started doing Lore 24, which is the
Oh,
new
yeah.
lore kind of social media kind of thing. You write a piece of lore every day and post about it. And so I've posted 4 days so far on my Patreon. They're all free, and they are about the Feral Expanse, which is a area that could easily be Dark Sun. If you wanted to call it Dark Sun, you could easily throw anything
Hmm.
that I've created into Dark Sun, I think. It might not be exactly the same as the Tablelands, but I think it would fit. And so, again, if you think it would fit or you don't think it would fit, let me know if you look at any of them.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Robert. This has been a grand time. And as always, if you folks have ideas for things that you want us to cover or questions or comments about our podcast, leave some notes.
Please do. Yeah, you can email us at obsidian at athos.org. And we actually got an email. It was just somebody asking what the Discord was. And so I sent them. And the Discord, if you're listening, you can go to bit.ly. It's bit.ly/ Dark Sun Discord with capital D, capital S, capital D. That'll get you there.
Right.
All right, Jesse. Thanks. Have a good night.
Until next time.